Hello and welcome to Board Game Bonkers. I'm JC, and this is the Bonkers Show where we cover, well, things that don't quite fit into the norm or a little bit bonkers. And today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 elements that we see in the future for board games. I'm going to be ranking these from the least likely to the most likely. And I'm also going to give them one each a rating on the factor scale for probability. Now, some of these do already exist in the board game industry, but will we see them actually gain traction through the years as we go along? Now, I don't have a predictable ball to see what's going to happen in the future, but we've done a little bit of digging to see whether any of these elements will come to fruition in the board game industry and become a bigger part within our board gaming lives. So with that out of the way, please don't forget to like and consider subscribing to the channel, and let us know in the comments down below, do you agree with any of these future elements that we see that might be taking the board game industry by storm, or perhaps not? And do you have any future predictions? Let us know in the comments down below what those are. So starting off with our number one, let's dive into the laptop. So number one, we have holographic tables. Now, I don't see this as something that's going to be sitting in our lounges, and the reason why is because of cost. I remember back in '93 when I walked into this arcade and I seen this holographic games console, well, more like a large, bulky machine. I just loved these holographic figures. It just popped out. And this was based on the TV show Quantum Leap, and I just thought, wow, it blew my mind. Put my hand through these figures that popped up. It was just majestic. And I just felt, well, this is the future. But of course, I never seen another one. And it made me think, why? And I can only put one thing down to that, being the cost. It's extremely expensive to create holographic designs, and you need a large machine. But will we actually see perhaps tablets in the future, phones become holographic enabled? Perhaps it's something that's way down the line. But for board games, there is a holographic table, and that was designed by Star Wars. And of course, that's a hugely large franchise. Now, I can't see this happening. I really can't see the affordability for the general public to be able to fork out the cash to play a holographic game. Certainly, it would need to be one that could play out several different types of games, and perhaps that's something we might see more as a gimmicky luxury item than something we'll see in many households. I'm going to be giving this a 1 out of 10 on our probability scale. So let's move on to number two. We have board game releases with available print at home miniatures. Now, we're talking specifically about these large-scale board games that have lots of miniatures and making those printable at home. Now, printable 3D machines are relatively cheap in comparison to how they were 5 to 10 years ago. You can pick one up for as little as £300. It does a pretty good job, but we'll actually see that being more available to be able to print miniatures. Now, of course, there are sites that allow you to print miniatures, but we're talking more specifically these large-scale board games, perhaps from Cool Mini or Not or Waking Realms, and making those files available. I see this as unlikely to happen, and a couple of reasons why. One, that there's a potential risk of copyright infringement, of taking those files and perhaps paddling them off as your own, or perhaps making a few tweaks and then releasing something of your own. And I feel that the second reason why is because a lot of people just can't afford to have a 3D printer in the home, let alone the space you need. And it's not really in the top of everyone's shopping list. So I'm going to be giving this a 3 out of 10 on the probability scale. So moving on to number 3, we have Tebaru. Now, you're probably thinking, what the F is Tebaru? And I was certainly thinking that as well. In fact, I was so confused, thinking, what on earth sounds like an actual musical instrument? But I'm just going to read out here what that actually means. So Tebaru was created by Explode, and it can best be described as a console for your games. Now, it's not actually a physical console, so don't be too scared of that. You're not taking a bulky machine into your lounge. that allows tabletop games to take advantage of digital assets and features, all while retaining the physical and social aspects that make them great. So what does all that mean in layman terms? Well, according to Tabletop on their website, Tabletop is a game system that seamlessly integrates the physical and digital worlds, keeping players focused on the board and its components while the system takes care of the game rules, enemy behaviour and storytelling elements. And further on, it states that patented, that it is talented because it's pretty impressive, is an innovative base on a board that sits underneath with electronic sensors that knows when figures are placed, the track their position reacts in real time. And what that happens is we put these chips underneath the miniatures that will then interact with the board, and then it'll bring the app to life, and then it'll help with that storytelling, but also help with that adventure that you're on. So there are a few games that have released this, one being Vampires Uprising Milan, one being Swords and Sorcerers that have used this, and the final third game that has used this Tabletop system is the Bad Karmas. So far we have 3 games that have released the system, but will we see more and more in the future that use that concept? Now it is a bit of a twist take on using an app companion. Now I'm in two minds about this. I think we will see games that utilise this system. I think it's unique and I really like the concept of it, but there is an added cost to this. But I feel as technology advances, I don't think the cost will be that much, given that it's quite a simple process, this chip. It's just making sure that all integrates and works with various different games, and we're sure it will. And I'm sure there will be a way in which you'll purchase one of those electronic sheets that slides underneath the main game board. I ran out of purchase many of them because it's all electronic based, meaning they'll interact with the app and the chips that are placed underneath miniatures. I'm giving this a 3 out of 10 on probability because I can't see a lot of games taking this on board. Perhaps I'm wrong. Well, let me know in the comments down below. Can you see this taking off? Can you see more games utilising the system? It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future, but I'm sure we'll find a few more utilising it, just not as many as we might think. Next up, number 4. So, dice with swappable faces. Dice Bodge is a good example of this, and that's simply where you take a dice and you'll be able to detach a face and put a new part onto that face and changing that dice and keeping it unique. Now, there's a few games that have used this concept. However, it can feel a little bit fiddly, so I can't see this being used in a lot of games. I think there'll be in a few, well, maybe some, but it's a little bit gimmicky and can be that fiddliness actually taking people away from that enjoyable experience, but it can have a fun element to it. I do feel that we will see this fade away. I can see it being in many more games in the future, and it's sure it will appear from time to time, but it's not something we'll see that often. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10 on probability scale. It will happen, and we're already seeing it happen. I just don't see it in thousands of games. I'm going to see this more in hundreds of games rather than thousands. Next, number 5, layered cards and transparent elements. So Gloom was one of the very first games that utilised this. In fact, it was the first game. Then you had Mystic Veil, which was popular and used this system. Essentially what you're doing, you have layered cards, you layer it on top of another, so you place them into a sleeve and they'll complement one another. You have transparent ones, you have non-transparent ones. I much prefer the non-transparent ones because I feel like transparent ones take away from that artistic feel and feels a little bit disjointed with the rest of the game. Now, that's a personal opinion, and some people love it. They also feel the cards are a little bit flimsy when they're transparent. Whereas I preferred traditional use of a card, and I certainly don't mind layering the cards. However, there is a caveat to that, and that is they can feel a little bit fiddly as you can swap the cards, and that increases the setup time and the teardown time because you have to also reset all the cards back again. And that can be a little bit of a put-off for many people. However, I do love the concept of building cards. There are lots of games that you slide cards under other cards, and that works really well. But we're talking more here about putting a card in the pouch and then putting another card inside that then layers on top, and it complements that card, creating a new unique card. I can see this in a huge amount of games, but I do feel we'll see more games utilize this. I still much prefer the more simpler, sleeker way of doing this by just simply laying a card on top of a card and just building it up there rather than put it in the sleeve then at the end of the game, taking that out the sleeve, resetting the game. It just feels a little bit too fiddly for my liking. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10 on the probability scale. Next up, number 6, pre-painted miniature options. So we're talking here about large, grandiose games that are making their miniatures available pre-painted or non-painted. Now, it does cost quite a bit to have pre-painted miniatures, but that takes a lot of hassle out of having to do it yourself. But of course, will that be an option that many people take on? Well, there is a cost element to this, so I don't think we'll see a lot of people. But for one, I would rather pay the extra to have my miniatures painted, and I'd be happy to fork out that extra little bit. Well, it's not a little bit, it's quite a lot. We've already seen this happen with some board game publishers, and I think it's a great option, and I think we'll see more and more of this become available in the future. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10 in probability. I think we'll see more towards the larger publishers doing this, not so much the smaller publishers. And I think it'll be more of a 50-50 basis where we'll see some provide this as an option, some not. And because of the amount of time it takes to print miniatures, it won't be an option all the time. Next, we move on to number 7. That's digital adaptations. And what we're talking about, we already have Board Game Arena and Steam, but also apps that assist games. And we're talking more about that. So apps that actually assist games, or perhaps app-specific games. So let's just dive more into that. So Board Game Arena is a great platform to test out games and see whether that game's right for you before you actually purchase a physical copy, or perhaps you're quite happy playing it online. Steam is fantastic as well. We've seen bigger, more popular games become available in Steam in digital form. For example, Small World and Scythe are available to play in Steam. And this is a great option for people to test it out, or perhaps just play it online, play it with friends across the internet. So it does have its advantages, but it does take away that element and enjoyment of physically feeling and touching and moving parts on a table. Now, can we see this actually becoming something more of the future? I simply think Board Game Arena will become more popular and more games widely available. I think Steam will have more games available and to bring and bridge that gap between those who play video games and those who enjoy board games. But I can't see thousands of games becoming available on Board Game Arena or Steam. But we'll come on to specifically apps that assist games a little bit later. Now, digital adaptations of board games, I'm going to be giving this a 5 out of 10 in probability. I think we will see more become available. It just isn't going to take the world by storm. And I still feel that having the physical game on the table is the best way to play a board game. Let's now move on to number 8, and that's universal board game terms. Though there's a lot of frustration out there in the board game world where you read a board game rulebook and they come up with a completely new state of terms, what that means. Now, wouldn't it be great if each board game designer or publishers had some specific terms of glossary that they would be using that's universal for the board game industry? For example, trash a card is a common concept that's used in rule books. And would that be the same as another term that's perhaps used? It's important to see how we actually streamline these terms in board game rules. Nobody wants to read a rule book that starts talking about completely different concepts and no one can understand, and it can confuse people. So, will we see that in the future? I think we will. And I think it takes a large company or a group of companies to come together to create these terms. I'm not sure when that will happen, but I think it'll happen at some point. Now, we want people to embrace games. We want it to be as simple and as straightforward as possible. And reading the rule book is an important element of that and how to learn the game. And it's important to make sure the terms are relevant and the terms make sense. And wouldn't it be great if all the board games used similar terms to make the readers understand what that means when they're playing a game and make playing a game a hell of a lot quicker than it will currently. You could have a rule book that's very thematic but uses different terms, and a rule book that uses simple, straightforward terms but isn't thematic. Now, it's important to get a balance, but I think people would prefer the simple, straightforward rule book over the thematic one using words that you need in this dictionary to look up and understand what they mean. So it's important, and I feel that we will see this in the future. I'm going to be giving this a 6 out of 10 probability. I think we will see a universal board game terms available, but it takes a lot of effort, and it'll take someone to put the neck out and engage and lead this. I just hope it does happen. So if you're watching this and you're a publisher, perhaps you're a game designer, then I'd like to know your comments. Do you think this is something that'll be useful? Let me know in the comments down below. Moving on to number 9. Apps to assist board games. Now, we talked about this before, but we're also talking about including AR and VR. Now, we've already seen Chronicles of Crime. They've utilized this where you go to a crime scene and you can use your mobile phone or your tablet and you can move that around the room. And it feels like you're in the crime scene where you could see what's happening. That's a really neat concept. It's nothing new. It's been done before, but I do feel that this is something that we will see in board games. However, there's a large caveat. That's cost. It's not cheap to be producing apps. It's expensive, and especially when it comes to augmented reality or virtual reality, it's extortion. I cannot see many games using VR. I think we'll mostly see some augmented reality more than VR. But more important, I think we will see apps to assist games. So I'm going to break this down into 2. Apps that assist games are fantastic when they can help. Now, I'm more of someone who prefers just to concentrate on the board game. I'm not a fan of using apps. In fact, I'm not a fan of using my phone when I'm playing a board game. But I understand that it's important for some games to use an app to assist you. Perhaps there is a detective game and you don't want to be putting the clues in a book. You want to put it in the app so you're not revealing the surprises as you're flipping through a book. I'm going to be giving this a probability score of 6 out of 10, but if we're talking about VR and augmented reality, I'm going to be giving that a 3 out of 10. I can't see many games utilizing that because of the sheer cost that's involved. And it just feels a little bit more gimmicky than a necessity, whereas apps that assist board games is a necessity for certain board games. I just hope that we don't see this going down the route of the app being more used than the actual board game itself. Finally, let's move on to number 10. Nowadays, AI, the use of AI. So we already have ChatGPT, which is highly popular in Midjourney for creating art, although there is now a free alternative because you have to pay for Midjourney, and that's Leonardo AI. And the results are stunning. Now, will we see more use of AI? I think as we go through the future, we will see as it becomes more powerful, more apps become available. There are hundreds of AI apps now available that do various different things. Help with video recording, text to video, art, impressions, and so forth. And I think we'll see some apps that will assist designing of board games, particularly around the mechanisms and how that implements. We've already seen games use this where algorithms have been built to actually predict the outcomes of cards, where there are lots of cards in the game, to make sure there's a balance in that game. So I think this is something we'll see more and more of in the future, and that will assist game designers and publishers. However, there is a risk here, and that is that can put people out of business. So we think about artists here. There's also another caveat to it, and that is the soul and feel of doing a game using AI compared to perhaps an artist sweating over designing and creating that artwork for the game, which has soul and heart in it. And you won't get that with AI, but then again, you have the devil's advocate here. The cost involved versus paying for an artist, for example, is night and day apart. It's far cheaper and more affordable to use AI than it is paying for an artist. And I think we will see some games use AI to clear it, which is important to be transparent. And I think someone will put in their character, design a game using AI. Perhaps that's something we might do as an example to see whether we can use AI to create a board game. Well, that's my top 10. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Perhaps you've got some future seeing of what's going to happen in the board game industry. Perhaps you disagree with some of my predictability scores. Perhaps you agree. Please let us know in the comments down below. Let us know if there's anything we've missed. Perhaps there's something you've figured and discovered that is going to happen in the future. It'd be great to know we haven't got a magic ball to predict anything that's going to happen in the future. That would be quite astonishing. In fact, that'd be scary. So thanks so much for watching. That's the end of this. My name's JC. This is the Bonkers Show, and we hope you've enjoyed this. And if you would like to see future videos like this, please let us know in the comments down below. Until next time, take care.
This is Bonkers.